let's get started.
We have
Right. Yeah.
all right. We have a couple of guests joining us today.
Yeah.
Just because of technical things, a couple of them haven't joined yet, but they'll join in hopefully in the course of the next couple of minutes. But
Yeah.
already with us on the call is Janice Nkaja and Kelvin Ochaya. And joining us a little bit later will be Marion Chirabo and Jacob Eyeru. They need little introduction, but maybe we'll also let them say just a little bit about themselves, what they'd like you to know about who they are. And we've had them on the show before. If you have been with us in season 1, you already know who they are and maybe even a little bit about what they stand for. So this conversation is really going to be about, what now? Elections happened, you voted or you didn't vote. Robert, did you vote, by the way?
Why are you asking difficult questions?
It's important that we know.
No, it's a private, personal choice that is, and I'm not supposed to tell you because the next question is, who did you vote for? And then you do what?
No. That is the real private one. We just want to know, did you vote?
I exercise the choice. Let's keep it that way.
Okay, all right. I voted as well.
Okay, good for you.
It was, I know I was there. It was one of those things where you're like, if I go early, I can finish early, and then I can get back to my day. I got there at about 7:45. I didn't. Nothing was set up yet. I remember just, how we are sort of in like alphabetical order and all of that. You could not know which line you're supposed to be in without asking. So I had to go asking each line until I said, where is KE? Where is KE? Where do I find? Until I found my line. And I voted at around 9:45 maybe. So it's a bit of a wait.
And just so you know, we've been having elections since 1996. Janice, were you born?
No, I was born in 2005.
There's something about you saying it that has made it real.
Yeah, because in 2005, I was involved in the campaign. I even represented the president at the first presidential debate ever in 2005. So you can see that long after we have had, even before Janice was born, there were elections. Why do you keep repeating exactly the same mistakes? But anyway, over to you, Janice. Kelvin, I hope we can get to see you because your camera is off. I don't know if you're fearing a repeat of the last time you were with us because you were too dark to be seen. Kelvin, turn on your camera.
Please, Robert, don't bully the youth. Don't do it.
Look at him. He's in exactly the same corner he was, only that it's daytime now, so we can see what he really looks like. Welcome, Kelvin. Your mic.
Oh, thank you.
Great. So, but let's, Fiona, I think let's start by reminding ourselves Kelvin was competing for office, and it might be great to just hear from him, one, what happened and what his experience was like, what he stood for, and how that went. Kelvin, run us through, remind us, what were you running for? What was your experience like? And for you as a young person?
So thank you so much, and I'm happy that you have accepted to host me again. I was running for the position of Lord Chancellor, LC5 Makerere University. And the experience was a bit complex, and it is not what I had actually expected in such a democratic country that we claim it is, but in a form of a pseudo. What shocked me was that most of the voters who are deciding leader, especially for the constituency where I was contesting, were actually coming from different districts. And they were ferried by...
What do you mean they were coming from? Explain to us what actually happened.
Well, so Makerere as an institution has different categories. There are those who reside within the university and also in the neighborhood. So those are the people whom you expect to directly benefit, especially from the leadership and the government. But now it shocks me that on the day of election, especially I witnessed it on the 15th when they were electing the president, that most of the voters, the majority of about 70% of the voters were ferried using public means like taxis and other cars to come and vote inside the university. So that means that we're actually talking to the wrong people. So if you had concentrated on talking to the people who reside within and also around the perimeter of the university, you'll find majority of them don't vote.
Okay.
Yeah.
And those who are voting don't reside there.
They don't reside there. They were coming from other districts. So somehow I think there was an election malpractice, especially by the candidates, some of the candidates who understood the dynamics of the politics. So I am being told that there were some of the candidates who actually asked people to change their voter location in the university. So that means when they change, you who has not co-opted people to change, you will not have voters. So they already consolidate their voters somewhere, depending on the numbers that they have had. So on the day of the election, that's when they ferry them. So that's the dynamics that played.
And you couldn't ferry anyone?
No. It was against the rules of the game democratically. It was not right, because I remember speaking to one of the candidates who was like, "Hey, by the way, so how many people do you have that you have consolidated?" I'm like, "What do you mean by that?" I'm like, "No, you have to change. You have to get friends and relatives and other people to change, to make sure that they change their voter location within the university so that you can go." I'm like, "No, that is against the principle of democracy. I cannot do that. What I can do is actually talk to the people who reside in Makerere University are the right people who are supposed to benefit from the government." So those are the dynamics that played against. So it's more like a college. And another thing is the commercialization of politics. I was so shocked that actually there are people who have turned elections to be business. What do I mean by that? They come to the polling station knowing that they are the right voters of that area.
Yes.
And they tell you, and you're like, "Oh, by the way, have you voted?" "No, I haven't voted." "Oh, you can cast your vote for me." And they're like, "No, what do you have for me? What are you gonna give me?" I'm like,
Wow.
"What do you mean? What?" So then I ask them, "So you are going to vote. Does it mean if I do not give you money, you're not going to cast your vote?" And they're like, "Yes, I'm going to go back with my vote at home. I'm not going to cast my vote. I will only cast my vote to the candidate who gives me something." So to me, I feel like I am so worried, especially about the future of this country, if that is the perception people are picking up, because there's quite a lot of conscious impediment, especially among voters. So something really needs to be done, where that consciousness needs to be like reawakened. Otherwise, it seems people have given up, especially on elections, because they have that perception that it doesn't actually yield and they do not benefit from the leaders that they elect.
So they want to benefit immediately by cashing
immediately. So they look at the immediate gratification, not putting in their mind the consequences or the impact that will actually directly affect them in the long run. So because they say they have been electing leaders, and after electing, they disappear. So for them, the only time they have gotten to eat, to benefit, it's during that time of election. So they try each and every way to make sure that they get something out of you. So it's really challenging, and so okay, I don't know what the right word to use, but I feel like really so heartbroken in the manner in which voters reason, because they only have one chance after 5 years to be able to
their benefit,
that are going to address their issues. Now,
Fiona,
I wonder.
Yeah.
Oh, you're saying something, sorry.
Now I was going to ask Fiona, so just to let Fiona know that finally Marion is in. Marion Chirabo has arrived. in style. Hi, Marion.
Hi, how are you?
We want to see you. There you go. Okay, no, you found us with Kelvin, and Kelvin was sharing his own experiences about what happened, and the two of you were standing in pretty much the same.
Yeah.
So, what was your own experience? Maybe Fiona, do you have a question for Marion?
Actually, my question is for Janice. So let's hear from Marion
all
first.
right. So, Marion, what was your experience? You and remind us what office you were standing for and where. What was the constituency? Okay, I think she has a slight tech problem. Kelvin,
Okay.
do you want? Kelvin, do you want to? Okay, come. Yes, Fiona.
Okay, I was just going to say, Janice being the youngest amongst us, and I'm not even sure if you were here.
2005.
Hey, you, my friend, 2005. I was in other places, but with you being the youngest, and again, I don't know if you were actually here in the country or not by the time we were having elections. But what was your experience? As I imagine it would be your first time, right? This would be the first time you're actually old enough to vote.
Okay, Marion seems to have come back.
Okay.
Sorry, my PC blacked out. I hadn't noticed. Sorry.
Yes. So remind us, where did you? What office were you standing for? And just break down for us the story, the facts. What happened?
So I was standing for LC5 Woman Councillor, Makerere University, on the NUP ticket as the NUP flag bearer. Honestly, I think it was a very grueling experience, I must say. A lot of things I saw that I never expected. I didn't expect it to get that bad. Of course, we knew we were going into an election that was unusual, but not to that extent, because it was plain, I don't know, daylight robbery. I mean, these people didn't have shame.
What did they do? What I mean, I can understand your anger at describing it, but we just want to know what were the things that happened there that made you reach the conclusion that you've reached.
So for me in Makerere, the first thing was, I think, the deployment for me, because a few weeks before the general election, what happened is that
deployment of what?
We didn't even know what. We just knew that there were security forces. The first thing was the deployment of the military. And the excuse was that the military had come in to act as some kind of protection because Museveni was the last person to do his campaigns in Kampala. So they were there to apparently secure different parts of Kampala and make sure that they're safe. So these people, we were surrounded by military men. Some of them even camped, because I live up a hill within Makerere. So some of them even camped below where I was staying. They were all over the place, military trucks, small tents of military men everywhere. When we're still processing that, hundreds of unknown young men. I mean, these guys could have been, I think, 18, 16 and above, started entering into the halls of residence, because at that time the halls of residence were empty, there were no students. We could not identify who they were. All we were told is that they were going to be part of the security that is going to man the elections. When I tried to ask, okay, so what are they going to do exactly in the election? Some said they're there to operate the BVK machines, but there were so many. Like they would fill the whole compound, litter the whole place. Unfortunately, I don't have pictures with me here, but I would have sent them just to show you. So already we were in a state of, okay, there is so much overwhelming security that along the way, these guys, we even had an incident with them and my campaign team, that one of my supporters was carrying my my poster, but was also wearing a Chagulani t-shirt. We just come back from a rally. So he was climbing up to my place to just drop off a few things and go. Once these military men who were just living below my place saw him, they started beating him up. Where are you going? What is the meaning of this? What are you putting on? They ripped his shirt, they beat him up. He just managed to like run away from them, but not after receiving the bruises on his back and neck. And I had to rush him to the nearest, medical center. And when I came up to confront them, they were intimidating us and telling us, what do you know what we found him with? And I said, you just found him with posters. You found him with posters. So is it wrong for us to campaign within Makerere? We are candidates. This is our our right to campaign within our constituency. So they intimidated us and chased us away. A week later or a few days later, they assaulted a female lecturer. And I remember Spire breaking this story. But I think because so many things were going on, it's really something that people didn't pick up. I also tried to put my own incidents there, but I guess it was too much for people, whatever was going on in the country. So already we were in a state of uncertainty, but I kept on hoping that, maybe selfishly, I must say, but I kept on hoping that these people were only interested in the presidential election, and maybe after the presidential election, things will cool down and, So the presidential election comes, because it's the first election I participated in before mine. And really, as a flag bearer of the party, we were supposed to organize to make sure that we protect our president's vote, and then we also protect the vote of the MP. So we prepare ourselves for a usual election. We didn't think that things would go so haywire in Kampala, as the trend was, that usually it's so bad out there, but in Kampala, because of the civic awareness that people have, and the fact that, we are more robust and quick to respond to certain situations, we prepared for an election, a normal election of let's have our agents there, let us make sure that we're monitoring, that there will be no ballot stuffing, that we'll make sure that we are verifying our candidates, because the law verifying the voters that come in, because the law allows us to do so. So we prepared for a normal election. So the morning of the election, the first thing we noticed that ours is a very small constituency. You get, unless you mobilize people won't show up. So we didn't expect a huge turnout, but we wake up to a university that is full of people. And these people are putting on yellow. And some of them, they are vehicles without number plates patrolling the area. Their military trucks. Of course, the military trucks had been a presence for a few weeks then. But the thing that was suspicious was those vehicles without number plates. I think for me, that was my first sense that something is very wrong. And then there are strange people who you can't verify that they are voters, like you don't know who they are, they're just moving around. Now, when we start to allocate our agents, we give them the EC registers, because the EC gives us registers, and as mandated by law, we are supposed to equally participate in the verification of voters. And that's where the issues started coming from. One, the EC officials made sure that our agents are like 10 meters, 5 meters away from their station. So if a voter was to come in and my agent is supposed to verify them, there was no way of me knowing if this person was really in the voters register. when we complained about that first of all, they're not supposed to sit that far. Then they just become observers. They do not become agents. They're supposed to participate in this process with you, so that we know that we have had a credible election. The first thing the EC told us that no, that is not, that verification is theirs. It is not their job. It is not our agency's job to verify that the verification is theirs. And apparently they have different registers from the ones they gave us. And we told them, but that's not possible, because we are all supposed to have one register that has the same voters. And these registers, as you can clearly see, they even have a scan code to show that they're actually registers that we purchased from you. Some were purchased from you, but some of them were given to us by you. Like if you want to verify them, but either way, even if you're saying that we have different registers, the bare minimum should be that you read out this voter's name so that we can see that both of us have them. At least let us know who these people are before they cast their vote, because for all we know, they could be, people from Katanga and they're not voters of Makerere. They completely refused. We tried to talk to their supervisors. The supervisor disappeared. He refused to show up. So while we are there,
So I'm laughing because you said you tried to talk to the supervisor and he disappeared. So where did he go to?
Yeah, I don't know. We asked them for his number. They refused to give us his number. You can imagine an EC supervisor. His number is like some secret, that candidates are not even allowed to inquire from him. Now, while we're still there are trucks of people entering the university, ferrying people. They are entering the lines, some of them putting on masks. There is a truck, a double cabin that entered in and they had masks on them. So there were no voters from one polling station to another. Like Robert, you have voted at Complex, then they move you and you vote at Lumumba, and we had no right to interfere with that. Because whenever we try to complain that this person, we want to hand over this person to the police, one, the police would arrest them, then let them go, and you would find them at another polling station. Secondly, even when you try to complain and you protest at the polling station, they would bring about 10 police officers with batons and everything to chase you away. Like, you who's protesting the illegality, you're the one who's being carried out of the polling area. And this was happening at all the 26 polling stations. Our agents call us, come here, but you're getting there. We called everyone that we could call.
Kelvin, do you want to supplement what Marion is saying? Did you want to say something?
I know. I thought she can carry on. It's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we called everyone we could call. I think at one time even Mayor Serindoji came in and tried to intervene, but it was almost impossible, because these people would smile at you in a mocking way and be like, "But the election is free and fair. Why are you people wanting to make trouble?" So we looked like fools. I don't know. We looked like such idiots. Fortunately for us, at the end of that day, Bobby Wine won that constituency. Nyanzi also won. We thought that was the end of it, as long as we have won, because he won Kawempe South by 7,000 votes. I saw the DR forms, we calculated together, and it was done. We even went to his home, Nyanzi's home, and we were celebrating, collecting everything, compiling, getting ready to go to the tally center. I think nothing prepared me for the tally center. Because after going through that experience, I thought at least we had fought and, we had come out. The process was haywire, but we had come out. The people's will had overridden whatever illegalities that were there. When it comes to the Tally Center, first of all, I don't know where they get these people. I think they got the whole ghetto structure, and there were people in cars. I don't understand how you can allow. Okay, the place is heavily infested with military, but they are cars that don't have doors. You know, like this. I don't know how to work. Like there are people coming, like a truck full of people with banana fibers, with what all over, all putting on yellow. And I'm like, but this study center, we're only supposed to like have like 3 agents and the candidate. And so what's going on here? Now to enter inside, I think the strategy was grab DR forms from them, overwhelm them, make sure that you are alone, you're the winner, but intimidate them to such an extent that you overwhelm them, you grab their DR forms, you make the loudest noise, you intimidate the EC into declaring your candidate. I think that was the grand scheme of it, because they had tried it at the polling stations, and some agents, they grabbed from some agents DR forms that we actually had to stick them together with cell tape. I think that happened in YS, where the agent brought back just pieces of paper, and we had to painstakingly put them back together in order to present them to the EC. But now when we get to the EC, you have to find where to put your DR form, because there's a mob of people waiting for you to grab it.
You put DR forms in bras.
I swear, you have to do it, because unless you
no, Mario, no.
Yes, I'm telling you. Like, that's how bad it was. Because once they see it with you, someone will come alongside you, grab it from you. And it doesn't matter how many police officers are there, security men are there, they will look on. It is up to you, Sayako. If you don't hide them somewhere, you will lose them.
Okay, let's just now, Marion, just because this story is okay, we can decide either we hear a bit from Janice, or we let Marion finish her story. It's so gripping. It's like a novel.
I know. It sounds ridiculous.
No, go on. Okay, you finish. You go on, Marion.
That is what happened. Now, for me,
so you are the talent center.
That wasn't the worst part. I think the worst part for me was to see Madina's, because the first thing is that we handed over, DR forms were handed over by some candidates to the EC. Now that's the worst mistake over you can make, to hand over your DR forms to the EC, because you will never get them back. You get? So you have to use some kind of semantics to outsmash the EC, somehow stay with your DR forms while proving that you actually won without showing your DR form. Like, it was crazy. Along the way, I told them, okay, let's see if we can bring other candidates to like prove our win, because now the EC started announcing things we hadn't heard of. They had their own results. And the way they would do it is that, so they had their tact that instead of reading the votes that you got in a constituency, and finish that constituency, let me say Kawempe South, let us do Wandegeya, and let us move from Wandegeya, then we go to Makere, and let us move from Makere, we go to YC. They would announce the results of Wandegeya, then after that, they go to a constituency in Kampala Central. You get? So by the time they come back to Kawempe South and they're announcing a polling station in Kawempe South, let me say like Makere, they have gone through 10 other polling stations in different constituencies. And I think
it wasn't sequential. It was not finish one constituency.
Yes. So the thing was to confuse you in such a way that by the time you come back to tally the votes in Kawempe South, you're already confused, because you have had one from Machindya, polling station in Machindya, a polling station you have heard from a polling station in Nakawa, you have heard from a polling station in Kawempe North. So you come back to your own constituency, you're trying to tally the numbers and you're confused about where you had started from and where you had ended. But we had endured all those things. I think for me, the worst part was watching the EC announce polling stations, some polling stations that didn't exist, announce results.
What?
Yes. Yes. They announced results that did not exist, that were different. We had three independent, because we had independent candidates to come and back us up, as the Nyanzi team. All our DR forms said the same things apart from the EC and Medina. Like you bring two other witnesses to stand with you. And the EC and NRM is telling you that, no, you guys, like literally they gaslighted us throughout that whole process. Gaslighting kabisa. And telling you that, no, for us, the results that we have is that you lost. You get. So it didn't matter.
I actually don't get, but let's go.
So when you say I'm not getting it, actually I'm not
It didn't
getting
matter what your dear form said. It mattered what they had. That the EC produced its own results, is what I'm trying to tell you.
So
Okay, Fiona.
I can't help but think of sorry, Marion. I just, from what you've shared so far, because clearly there's more. I can't help but think of all the apathy that I've been just hearing in how people. I don't say that it's specifically with only young people, but just all the apathy I've been hearing in how people are talking about, whether it's about the fact of why they didn't vote, which, part of that apathy comes from exactly what you're explaining, or experiences similar to those and many others. And I think this is a good point for us to hear from Janice, because as I had said earlier, Janice is the only one amongst us who is probably voting for the first time, or even, actually being an adult through, a national election, a presidential election. And I am so curious to hear what the experience has been like for you as a young person, and in fact, and a young person actually who is really like on the pulse of politics. Just share with us your thoughts, your experience, and what the feeling is, because from Marion, now us we are now like in a different, some of us are in a different generation, but what's the feeling in your generation, in Gen Z? Yeah.
Thank you, Fiona. Unfortunately, I was unable to vote because I had an examination on the day of the election. It's very ironic. But my parents are big voters. They always vote every single year, and they voted this year as well. And I think the consensus is always around how frustrating it is. My father's experience particularly was that where he's registered as a voter, where he usually registers as a voter, he reached and his name was not on that registrar. And so he was so frustrated that he just had to leave. So that was his experience. But also like largely around the day of the election, when I did ask the rest of, like you said, people in my generation whether or not they're going to vote, I remember someone particularly told me that their parents forbid them from stepping towards a polling station because they were genuinely worried about their child's well-being or safety as they commute from their house to the election or tallying center. So that was a very interesting dynamic, because to the extent that most of my friends had to move from their universities, or I remember someone made the joke that I'm leaving Kampala, I'm going to the village to hide from the election. Can you imagine someone hiding from an election? I'm not even messing with you.
I know people who did the same. I do.
So it is such a very interesting dynamic, to the extent that someone has to physically move to stay away from the potential violence. And that one would think that this is a valid conclusion given the history of elections in general. But also it was the consensus around the fact that young people actually did not vote, particularly because they were confused. And this is a conversation I've been having constantly, whether the credibility of the president they want, in that they want change, but they don't see a credible, popular candidate to vote. It is because it steps away from who has the numbers to who do you think will vote best or who is most credible to vote. And it's a very difficult conversation to have with very, very many people, because they run on a very, we just want to change the president, to a point that they don't care who they are changing to. And people keep asking me, so I think, I know it's going to annoy particular people on this panel, but I remember particularly when the president of Venezuela was abducted by Trump. And then we had, I think, a tweet go out from Mr. Chagulani's X handle. And I don't know if you guys saw it, but it was around the area of him juxtaposing how the Trump president, the Venezuela president was taken out to the current president. So he was implying that Trump should also intervene in Uganda. So essentially, was he trying to say Trump should come take out Museveni? It was very, very, for me, I think that was the last straw for me. Because currently Africa is having issues with external interference, but then now you are having an opposition leader actively calling out a president who undemocratically extracted a different president from their own nation, implying to do the exact same thing in Uganda. I think for me that was the biggest issue with, I think that was the last straw when it came to Mr. Chagulani for me, because I'm such a believer in him, and he is doing such a daring thing. And he's putting his life on the line, his family on the line. He's doing all these incredible things. But at the same time, at the grand scheme of things, when he does such things, then start to question whether or not he is in fact competent to call out a president who just wakes up one morning and cuts all funding from critical agencies, presidents who act on a whim. So that was a big conversation we're having with very many of my friends. We're like, we love Chagulani, but is he the person that we think is competent? Does he have the competence capacity? And so we had so many young people who are in a state of, we want change, but the representation we have of that change, we don't think it's sufficient. And so that also feeds into the whole Museveni narrative of protecting the gains of he has been in power longer, so he's more competent. What do young people want? Things like that. So it is not just, then that also further builds onto political apathy, because they're like, why are we wasting our vote? So it's a very complex issue for young people, because we are everyone has an opinion. I don't think I've ever come across a young person my age who does not engage politically. But at the same time, I guess for us, we want to reorient ourselves with not only the protection of our state, but also the credibility of what that could potentially look like. So for me, it was not necessarily about the election itself, but also the discourse about the election. So that's where you find memes like, in mind I had Chagulani, but when I went to the poll, I drew Besigye in a corner and ticked him. So that is a wasted vote. So when you have such things happening, you then start to question what is the point of an election in the grand scheme of things. So I think those are my general thoughts around it.
Fiona, one of the things that I promised when we went public, one of the things I promised was to bring some historical perspectives to this conversation. And listening to Marion describe what happened in Makerere University, and just listening to the frustration of an active participant in the election, listening to Kelvin, who was completely sidelined. And then listening to the loss of faith that Janice is speaking to, I think that the country is at a very, very, very delicate point. What do I mean? That processes that are supposed to instill confidence and legitimacy and belief have been so thoroughly undermined by the behavior of individuals that a country can actually disintegrate as a result of those kinds of thinking. So if people defect and decide, because the most interesting statistic I saw was that the people who stayed away, the Janices, were almost 50% of the voters.
More.
Now, okay, so I want to tell you two stories. So it's interesting how the more things change, the more they remain the same. They say history repeats itself, first as a farce, then as a tragedy. The way this country has played with elections is so disturbing. There was supposed to be an election in 1970 or 1971, and there had been one in 1962. There had been one in 1961 and 1962. There was supposed to be another one, I think, in 1966, something. Then there was a crisis. It was postponed. Then a one-party state was declared. Then they came up with this idea that for you to stand for an election in 1970, you had to get nominations from 4 other constituencies. So we always come up with these funny hurdles that we set up. And guess what happened? There was a coup in 1971. And so that election didn't happen. So then we came up to 1980. I was there. In 71, I was there, but I was a year old, 2 or 3 years old. Then 1980, Marion, if you think yours was bad, in 1980, the EC was announcing results when the then chairperson of the military commission issued an order that the EC stops announcing results, and in his capacity as chairman of the military commission, there's a man called Paulo Mwanga, would then announce the results. Why? Because at the point at which he intervenes, when the EC at that time was announcing results, Semogerere of DP was leading, and Obote was going to be defeated. Guess what happened? We went to war. So we had 5 years of civil war and people died and people were killed. And we had this whole chaos because a process was subverted. But one of the things, again, the answer to what I think would be the ideal answer to Janice's question is people went back and reflected and said, how do we rebuild a coalition that can provide a political alternative? So, Janice, what you were asking, how do you allow alternative leadership to emerge, whether it's on the sidelines or those who may have succeeded to go to either council or parliament? How do they reorganize? How do you reorganize and rebuild around some workable processes? So, for instance, what I would be keen on asking you, both Marion and Kelvin, is that have you thrown your hands in the air? Or are you, for instance, some of the things you described, the victory that you were robbed of, how do you reverse that? What are the lessons that you may have learned that you think next time you can use to make sure that this kind of behavior can either be countered or at least, I don't know, so because at every time this happens, you can either throw your hands in there and say, this is it, we go away, but the country can go in a particular direction. So the people who behaved the way they did in Makerere, the ones you've described, are Ugandans. They are not foreigners, they're Ugandans. So they are going to behave the same way. We're building a political culture. How do we counter that political culture, you think?
And perhaps as they answer that same question, If they could just, one of the things I think that's coming up for me, even when you spoke about coalition, I thought about how the opposition is quite fractured. Like as I looked at the ballot in my hand on that day that I was voting, I thought it's just there's all these people who are running against, the ruling party, and we are all divided into all these like many little factions, and I wonder how effective even
I
that
I
becomes.
I have an answer for you, but
Ah,
but I want to first hear from both Marion and Kelvin before me who was once a leader of the future, now that tomorrow has come and gone.
it's another tomorrow.
I know that my tomorrow has come and gone. So let's hear from Kelvin and Marion, whose tomorrow hasn't yet come.
Maybe Kelvin could start.
Well, I think so. It's a complex matter. One thing I am so proud of being a Ugandan, because I believe Uganda is actually the most beautiful country in the world. I had the chance of traveling abroad, and I look at abroad to be very artificial. So when I hear young people saying in Uganda is terrible and abroad is the best place to be, it really breaks my heart. And now, on your question, I think it is us, the citizens of Uganda, to make the Uganda to become the country we wish. So we wish, like, what kind of a Uganda do we actually want for us and for the future generation to come? So that has to be at the back of our mind, and it has to be the driving factor that should keep pushing us not to give up and to carry on. But however, much as now we are operating in a democratic era, and there are principles and there are the rules of games that needs to be followed in all the processes, because I believe for this country to be reorganized, it needs the independence of institutions. Now, institutions, I look at it from the broader perspective. You start from family level, you go to school, you look at the ministries, you look at the cultural institutions, you look at the religious institutions. But the mere fact that for now we are operating in an oligarchic government where power is centered, among the few, and it just makes things very hard, because the few have the resources. They have the resources, so they can make any kind of decisions, and that's why we're able to see some of these moral turpitudes that happens, especially being engineered by some of the state actors. And you can see, I don't think one of the biggest mistakes was actually violating our rights, especially to access internet. I don't think that the Constitution of Uganda does not explicitly grant UCC powers to actually shut down internet. It doesn't. But however, they were riding on the Article 43 and the Uganda Communication Act. But there is also the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, which stands against that, because you need to give people the freedom of access to information and also freedom of expression. So what UCC did was totally wrong, because it was the only tool that the young people could actually have that trust in the election process, because they can be able to take some of the videos and share them online. But that switching off the internet just meant clearly that the winners were already predetermined. So what they had to do was just to switch off internet so that they can carry on with their irregularities. So we really need a total. I don't know. I don't know how this can be started, but I think we need to go. I don't know if there is a generation that needs to do that, but I feel we are in a total mess, in a total confusion, in operating in a complex ecosystem. But we don't have to lose hope or trust. But I believe, yeah, we need to go back and have a conversation, because democracy is about having a conversation among ourselves. What kind of Uganda do we want? How can we actually achieve that Uganda that we need? And then and then work together, because I mean, we're going to leave Uganda here, so I don't expect the people who claim they have much power to continue to suppress and oppress the marginalized. I mean, even God himself came to earth and he left. He left the earth here. He left. Otherwise, he could have gone with the earth. The mere fact that he was God and he took it up by himself. So
God is present all the time.
Sorry?
God is present all the time.
Absolutely. So yeah. So
let's hear from
even the people who think they are strong will one day go and they will leave the country. So let us try to conduct ourselves in a moral way, have respect for one another, and share the little resources that we have, so that we can all live like a better life.
Mario.
So
for me, Robert, I've been an organizer, a political organizer, since my days at the university. I think since my first year. And I was talking to someone yesterday. I was talking to one of my friends, and I was questioning whether all these years I've spent in political organizing have been a waste, because frankly, in my election, I felt so hopeless. After going through Nyanzi's election, I got the sense that my election was in trouble. But I think the worst part of it all was the helplessness. That I knew that they were going to come for me, but I knew, and I know this is going to sound cynical, it's going to sound very bad, but then also I want to connect it to perhaps the standpoint to where you see Janice's criticism of Bobi Wine, but I'll tell you that it is the sense of hopelessness, that you know that there is a state machinery that is coming for you with all the violence, with all the power. They have the EC on their side, they have the courts on their side, they have all this, and you're just this one individual who you find yourself, you're the man in the arena. 45 million Ugandans who, 45% million Ugandans who supposedly you feel like you're fighting for, because if you do, by some stroke of good luck, win the struggle that you have for justice, these people get to live in a Uganda in which, you know, democracy thrives. That's the whole idea. That's why we are fighting. That's why we, even when we feel that elections may not work, but the idea is to keep on fighting until perhaps one day we actually get to the finish line. We get to achieve what we want. But the thing of that helplessness, being so alone, and you know that they're going to railroad you and there's nothing you can do. And it puts you in such a desperate situation that I think there will come a time, and very soon, when history will repeat itself, that young people will be put in such, young people or just Ugandans will be put in such a situation that you may have to resort to violence. Let me finish. So we are criticizing Bobi Wine for feeling that that he has to appeal to the US government to come and step in and take over. But I will also give it to history that people like Museveni negotiated with the US in order to come into power. So what he's doing is not something that is absurd. But it also comes from a point of desperation, because at the end of the day, the US imperialism is what sustains Museveni in power, that he's such a strategic ally for them. And that is why part of the reason he has stayed in power so long, who is the fuel in his engine, who provides the weapons, who provides everything at his disposal to stay in power? It's the US. And imperialism in general, US imperialism is what sustains him, because he's a strategic power and they need him to keep East Africa in control, right? So it wouldn't be so, it's not so absurd that you are a freedom fighter in this country and you know that your opponent is sustained by a certain machinery, but you know that you don't stand a chance, that these people, because he has their backing and he's only as strong as they allow him to be. So the desperation that you have, because at the end of the day, you're the one whose house is being raided, you're the one whose wife is under capture, most of your friends and colleagues are either killed or they are behind bars, you don't know where they are. You are supposed to give direction to a nation that seems to be unwilling, and this is to Ugandans, they seem to be unwilling to fight for the same hopes and dreams that you have for them. How can I say it? We say we hate the bad governance, we hate the politics of it, we hate the violence. But I mean, we even saw it in the protests against corruptions that we had as young people. That you wake up in the morning, this thing affects all of you. Taxpayers' money is being squandered. Your hospitals have no drugs. You have family members who have died because of the inefficiency of the health system. You have recently PLE results came up, and we are casting doubt on PLE results, that even our education has lost credibility, that we are in school, but we are not sure about this education system, that we are putting P7 kids, 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds. We're not sure about the education that is being provided for them. What does their future look like? If we, as Ugandans, are even doubting, like the country is in a mess, it's affecting every area of our lives. We cannot escape this bad governance. But when it comes to time for us to actually stand up for something, stand up for this country, because there's no way all of us are going to go abroad. This is the Uganda that we have. It's a Uganda that we have to sit with. But you're telling people, okay, this is our chance, let us rise up, let us stand up to this bully. And you're standing alone.
So I want to, Marion, and I want to answer Kemi's question. So my advice, or rather my answer to you, is actually an answer that both Marion and provided, because I actually have the answer. And I am going to explain it and hope to hear what both of you have to say. So first of all, you have to be very careful. You are not the first people to stand up. This is not the first time this country has been in a mess. So that's point number one. Point number two, you are not the first ones to stand up to fight for the things that you're describing. Number three, you are not the first ones to be disappointed by the reaction of the Ugandans. There is a long history. We've been around as an independent country for over 60 years. So the first thing, the answer to your question, Kemi, is we now know that the opposition is fractured and that the incumbent government will behave the way it does. So there is no hope there. So where's the hope? And so the hope, first of all, is in what the lessons you have taken from this experience are. So I've been in close contact with a lot of actors who stood up and they tried to do something during Amin's time, tried to do something in the first Obote government and the second. And if you think your situation is hopeless, I think for those people, the situation was worse. You go and read the story of a man called Festo Chibenjere. There is a very interesting book called The Dungeons of Nakasero. Go and read it. People were held in very bad conditions. So detentions, disappearances, killings, it's not the first time they happen. How did people who were leading the struggle respond? There were various ways of responding. But the most fundamental one is what Janice described. You, the leaders of tomorrow, because your tomorrow is coming, sorry to make fun of you, if you need to exercise, Janice and Marion, David, Jacob has joined us, you need to learn the art of conversation about the real issues. How do you frame discussions? Are they serious discussions trying to find solutions? Or are we just making a mockery of the situation and laughing? But you must have the conversations describing the country you want, organizing amongst your peers and creating an awareness. That's the starting point. You can do that in many ways and in more ways than people in the 60s, 70s, and 80s could have done because technology makes it possible. Number two, Marion, this is your greatest responsibility. Sitting down and assessing what happened and where did you forget the establishment? Where did you go wrong? What are the lessons you learned and how can you build again? Listen to what the Genesis are telling you. What are they saying? What are they saying? Political organizations. I mean, the current president in 1981 didn't have the backing of the CIA or the US, but he organized a completely different group of people and said, maybe we need to try this route. So your responsibility is to say, we now know that the state will behave like this. What is the route? The most important thing is to not lose hope. It's not to become desperate. It is to become disciplined, structured, and scientific in the way you approach these things. Every experience is a learning. And if you give up your agency, if you give up the belief in your ability to change big things in small ways, you will regret why you walked away. So don't be ruled by desperation. Be ruled by the lessons you learned. Sober, calculated. Yes, if Ugandans don't respond to the fact that their education grades are bad or that hospitals have no medicines, they're not bad people. They're the Ugandans you have. What are you going to do about it? How are you going to convince them? If Ochaya turns up at a polling station and his voter is telling him, first pay me before I vote for you, how do you change that? You cannot castigate that person because that's the person you have. So my point to you is, when does NUP sit down and make an analysis of why they ended up where they did? How does Janice, in her vantage position, engender debates and discussions amongst her peers, which get them to see the country differently? That is the way that is the answer. It is to have a higher level of responsibility. You want to be a leader, you cannot afford desperation. You want to be a leader, you cannot afford hopelessness. You want to be a leader, you must understand your people. You can't say these people cannot stand up with me. Why aren't they standing up with me? You have to. That's your responsibility. They say, if you can't stand the heat, you get out of the kitchen. So you, Marion, you must go back and analyze what went wrong. But I am, as I said, I'm a leader. My tomorrow came and went when I was doing other things. So let me now just quickly introduce Jacob. Jacob, good morning.
Good morning, Robert, and good morning, everyone.
You are late.
No. The link was also very late on my side. Yes, I was late, but there are 2 late there.
Oh, okay, I'll leave it to Kemi to engage you. I had promised to sit back, so let me first sit back and enjoy a good coffee.
After giving us the wisdom, you just rest. Good. Jacob, karibu sana. Thanks for
Asanteni,
joining us.
Kemi. Thank you.
Actually, as Robert was speaking just now, hopefully you caught. Were you able to catch what he was saying just now?
Yes, I caught the part on responsibility to frame issues and take up your space as a leader, not take up excuses.
Yeah. He brought to mind an article, and I'll share. I'm sure all of you might be interested to read an article. It's by a friend of mine, a lawyer, John Musime. It's entitled "The Politics of Negotiation: Why Museveni Wins While the Opposition Moralizes." And there's something he said in this article about. He said successful governance is rarely found at ideological extremes. It exists in the pragmatic middle, conceding here, holding firm there, and constantly recalibrating alliances. President Museveni continues to govern because he has mastered the art of negotiated power, while the opposition remains trapped in a cycle of moral platitudes and electoral theater. I thought, and it's a really interesting article. I'll definitely send it to everyone. I think that what Robert was saying just now had so much to do with that, with strategy. And because it's true, as he said, these are the Ugandans we get, the ones who are maybe refusing to do this or refusing to do that, but these are the Ugandans we get. And what does it look like to truly organize? To organize and have those conversations about real issues, even stepping outside. And it's a difficult thing to even step out of our emotions because the state of the country inevitably affects how we feel about many things. But to step out of those things and mobilize and create that type of awareness. I've said before in the program that I envy what Robert's generation, their tomorrow, has gone, but still, what their generation was, the kind of conversations they were able to have in their time. And of course, that was also dependent on the circumstances of the time, the kind of conversations they were able to have and create that wokeness. I guess us now we are calling it wokeness, that wokeness around real issues. And I'm curious to hear, Jacob, for you, and I'll ask the same question as well to Marion and Kelvin. What for you would organizing look like? For us to actually organize in a meaningful way that helps us step out. Perhaps like take whatever lessons we are getting right now and create real change.
Thank you, Kemi. It's good to be back on the new bridge. And it's good to see my good friends Marion and Kevin on here. I had resorted to listening to the space, seeing as it was becoming hard for me to get on here. But I'm glad I'm on. And I think for me, this is a very interesting, not really interesting only, but it's a very personal, sentimental question. For me, it's the crux of the matter. Where are we with organizing? Where are we going? And I think, first of all, we have not defined a goal. That's the first problem I've seen for many of the young people who are insisting that they are very consequential in terms of the future of Uganda. They have actually not defined what future they are talking about. We talk about futures in an abstract sense. If you're saying you want a Uganda where hospitals work, you want a Uganda where there are better roads, where there are better schools, where there is less corruption, in my view, that stance politically is like a baseline. Everybody wants that. It doesn't matter which side of the aisle they are on. And if you're going to charge yourselves in that direction, you are just going to be throwing yourselves in the frying pan. To say you are saying what is expected to be said, and you are driving yourselves forward in that manner. I think for me, the end product needs to be something that we live in terms of how young people want to engage in politics, and we talk about the process product. In other words, what kind of Uganda do we want to get us there? And if we can achieve that, if we can have that pushed better, then you can see more young people being produced on the side of the end product than we're having now. And I'm just going to give you an example. We have been saying for some time that we need to look at the electoral setting in terms of a generation as young people to say, if you are insisting that there is an affirmative seat for young people and you want to attract brilliant young people, then maybe you should look at the process that brings young people into politics for guaranteeing their presence there. And that process is managed at the Electoral Commission. So you look at the standards and you first argue things that show that you are an organized generation. For example, if you're saying that members of parliament pay 3 million to be eligible to contest, the first sign of organization of your generation is if you are denying that, you can use your presence, your leadership, your structures to get that over the line. But one of the things that I heard from a colleague, not really a colleague,
I want to be, Jacob,
yes,
Jacob,
yes.
I just want to make sure that I understand you properly. And on that, so you're saying that the people should have a minimum 1 or 2, 3, 4 things around which to organize.
Very true. We must organize along lines that are not just generalized end goals. They must be generation-specific end goals. I was just coming to another. When we're listening to all this talk of iPod money between NUP and the other establishment forces, I asked some of youth leaders in the youth leagues, and I said, do any of you feel iPod money in your political parties? And they said, no, we don't. And I said, but do you know that the iPod MOU actually says one of the initiatives for which iPod was brought into place was to ensure that we have, youth leagues, women leagues vibrant. So why don't we argue that for every money that comes institutionally from these bodies that fund political parties, some percentage of that is availed to young people in that party, regardless of which party you're talking about, whether MNRM or your FDC. In your FDC or in your NUP, can the iPod money, 30% or 40% or 10%, be for the youth league of your party? So that your youth league can now begin to organize with those resources, because your biggest argument is that you have problems resource-wise. That kind of reasoning is what will get young people to begin to emerge in the general scheme of things. If we do not see ourselves in the process, but we only see ourselves for a goal in the end product, we're not going to cut it. And for me, that is where the issue is. One of the things that I think make this topic for me very sentimental is that we are increasingly arguing numbers without organizing those numbers for influence. If you cannot translate the presence of youth MPs in parliament into a verifiable agenda, an agenda that is consistent, which reminds me, I almost forgot. The other thing that I talked to the iPod Secretariat about that they raised as an issue from Secretaries General of the political parties was that their issue with the youth leagues was that young people are just not organized enough to stay put in one political party. That if you wake up in the morning and Marion is a NUP, by evening Marion could be arguing for FDC, and the next day she's in NRM. That we are too impatient with our goals, that we want our goals to be achieved by any means possible. So there is no trust process on young people. But I think for me, it's not even just impatience with our goals. It is impatience with the processes that deliver political products. It's just like in manufacturing. If you know that you are going to participate in production of paper, you know that you have to deal from the tree, move on to, harnessing that wood into soft tissue, and then move on to production of hardened paper. That process cannot be escaped. Young people are not talking about the foundational processes of participating in politics. Number one, it's just knowledge of political organization. If you meet young people who are agitating for political space and headlining, you are looking at people who, yes, have issues, but those issues are the product of a political establishment. you cannot merely, based on the presence of issues of product or of process, as your basis for justifying your presence on the table. And for me, that is the major issue. Now, let me speak more clearly on simple terms in terms of what I think we are not doing right as a generation. Number one, we are not organizing as allies. We are organizing as enemies in different dynasties. Marion here is a very good friend of mine when we meet. When we don't meet, we are not talking about anything. There is no platform bringing us together. But Marion and I have a history we share.
Apart from the new breed. This is the
yeah, exactly. Which I was going to. Very true. So, except for the new breed, Marion and I are not speaking. If you ask why are we not speaking yet, we are both very politically active. And that doesn't go for just the two of us. It goes for someone like Dr. Shamim Nambasa, who is a very brilliant young leader in NUP, and another brilliant young leader, maybe Sekidega Moses in the NRM. There is no platform where those people are sitting down as a generation to say, well, yes, we are all in politics on different sides of the aisle, but like there was a consensus in the 1980s that the state needed recasting. What is our consensus, even if we are on different sides of the political aisle? And for me, that is how the organizing needs to settle down. That's where most of my work this year is going to go. That we need to start talking about Uganda in 20 years. What average age of parliament are you talking about? What nature of policy are you saying is driven by young people? What legislative agenda are young people pushing forward that can speak to their own needs and therefore help them emerge politically beyond praise singing? Because while I am happy to support NRM flag bearers, I am not happy to emerge as an NRM young man who is simply known for praising whatever comes of whoever's mouth. I do not want to be the young leader who is there to just say whatever the president says is right. No, I am in the NRM with my head. I want to know whether what the president is saying works for my people that I have come to represent. If it does, well and good, I will praise sing. If it does not and does not contribute to the Uganda I believe in, I must have a platform where I can seek to correct that or to express my dissent without being cancelled by praise singers. That kind of organization cannot happen individually. You need to begin to form critical masses in your groups of gatherings to say, how do we move forward in this circumstance? How do we organize ourselves, even though under the radar, but to emerge, not to simply remain under the radar? The last thing I want to talk about is this belief by young people that social media noise actually translates to ground impact. And I think in many respects it does, but it does on knee-jerk situations. In other words, what you do on social media, from my experience now, is that you don't deal with systematic issues, you deal with circumstantial issues. You're dealing with issues that are simply questions of today that will elapse at 5 p.m. and will require, new questions to be answered tomorrow. You can shout at an issue. I'll just give you a good example. I've been following the saga with the airlines, and I've been one of those people who have suffered the brunt of an ineffective management at the airline. One of my friends came in, away from myself, one of my friends came in from Tanzania about 2 weeks ago, and he was here on some work with schools. He needed to fly out on Wednesday, and we needed to meet. He was staying at Onomo, and he needed to exit because the prices were very high. He could not stay longer. And he received this email that he thought, this is just last week. He thought it was a joke, that they're saying your flight has been rescheduled to Friday from Wednesday. And he said, man, I'm out here, they're telling me the flight is on Friday. And it's been noise on social media about why this is a problem. the management of the airline and how it's failing and so on. But that is actually not just a mere single point problem. It's not just a CEO problem. It's a huge management problem. It's a huge recruitment problem in the country, where we are not identifying actual talent. We are identifying people who are close to us to take on positions. And in that process, in that procedure, you are not developing a country when you're not putting your best talent forward. You're regressing a country 1 year at a time. You can have all this GDP grow. You can have all these so many things because the current leader knows how to work out a system, even if it is imagined in a crooked way. But if you hand that over to another leader who may not have a gorilla, I call it gorilla talent, in other words, creating sense out of chaos, you might end up with a country that is back to basics, where you are saying, oh my God, how did we get here? How did we land into people who cannot do A, B, C, and D? And that is a problem. It's already happening in the politics, that the politics is not about who has the better sense. It is about who has the better resources to facilitate the processes for being declared. Now, when you end up like that as a country, you are beginning to get spoiled in the critical areas. If you go to the education sector, for me, I think the country is built on two strands. The first strand is a strong state that can coerce action, whether good or bad, but it has to be existent. The second strand is an educated elite emerging that can hold the responsibility of the direction of a state. In other words, that can think, that can argue out, that can enforce a consensus, that the mass, whether illiterate or peasant community, can be used, can be built upon into the next level of development. If those two things are not working well, you end up with a very big problem. And if you ask yourself, what is the academia in Uganda being built like? Whether you're talking about Makerere and you sit down the students there, how is their thinking? How is their construct in terms of nationhood, in terms of statehood, in terms of patriotism, leave alone the singing of songs, but in terms of where Uganda must go and how they contribute to that, that is beginning to fall back. Then you're beginning to have a country that is working to fail.
So just as a way of sort of beginning to bring this to some kind of shall I say, conclusion, but, figure out how one we all go forward, but how we can make that platform we've just created here.
I wanted to make a comment about what Jacob has said.
Go ahead, Ochaya.
Yeah, I just wanted to debug something Jacob said. Young people are organized. They are very organized. They know what they want. They know the country they want. But the challenge is like the ecosystem, the environment that is being created doesn't favor them. Doesn't favor them at all. I will give for the case of point, let's say like in Makerere University. Like it is forbidden for students to gather and have political talks. And political parties are the vehicles of change. So for young people to actually get that experience and skill to run a nation, they need a political party to shape them. So now if institutions like Makerere University bans political party, where do you expect these young people to get those rights and have such kind of discussions? So
sorry, go finish, Kelvin. So
until when we create that relationship of trust, that relationship of selflessness, that whatever discussions we are having, other parties don't look at it as a threat, but they look at it for the common good and interest of the country. It is going to be very hard for us to have a conversation meant to better this country, because you will do it, they will come and pick you. They will come and pick you the next day.
Yeah, but then also I want to add on what you're saying, but then also how do you have a conversation?
Marion, we are not seeing you.
Sorry. I'm saying, but then
Ask her.
also, how do you have a conversation with people who, for you on your side of the aisle, having a conversation literally means that at the end of the day, you picked up. Now, for example, let us say, if we're to organize as young people, let me say, we're talking about having a conversation, let me say, between NOP and NRM. We have come from an election as, let me say, as chaotic and as bloody as this one, where there are about 2,000 youth who have, on the opposition side, who have participated in this election and are behind bars. Some have been killed. But for all intents and purposes, this atmosphere that has been created has been, let me say, in the favor of the NRM youth. So you want me to sit down at a table with you, bloodied and bruised. And for all intents and purposes, the reason why I'm bloodied and bruised is because of you. It's because the system favors you to go through. How are we supposed to have a conversation in that regard? There's no one day you're going to stand in solidarity with me on the basis that I'm a young person like you and maybe come up in court and stand bail for me. Because at the end of the day, the system benefits you. It benefits you for me to be bloodied and bruised. It benefits you for me to be killed. I think sometimes we talk about these things and we talk about them in such an elitist way. We're not being practical. I can't have a conversation with you if having a conversation with you, my opinions, or first of all, I can't have a conversation with you when I can't speak my mind. And when I do speak my mind, it puts me at risk. I suddenly become a threat to you. So I don't see how that can happen. Conversation, discussion with who? I cannot discuss with someone who's trying to kill me for holding an opinion. You get? So I don't understand. But also when we're talking about, when people are talking about certain issues, but the personal is political. The personal is political. If I can't go and access basic healthcare, it's personal. But why can't I access basic healthcare? It's because of the politics that comes with the health system. If I cannot trust, let me say, my brother's PLE results, why is that so? Because of the politics in the Ministry of Education. If there is a danger every time I get into my car and go on the road because of potholes, why is it? Why is it so? It is a personal thing. My getting into an accident is a personal injury to me, but why is it so? It's because of a political aspect. So, but it also doesn't matter. I feel like it also doesn't matter, in my opinion, but also practically, it doesn't matter even when we have these conversations. Because at the end of the day, the system we live in is constructed that way for a purpose. It is to entrench power. It is for a certain class of people who want to remain in power. It doesn't matter how many conversations you have. Even if we go to the EC and demand, they reduce the minimum of 3 billion to 100 cents, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, I'm going to wake up on polling day surrounded by the military because the system wants to entrench itself. And this is the realization that Museveni came to in the 1980s. The system was rigged, no matter how many debates he was going to have about it. And Ugandans weren't willing to follow him. So Muna, a guy decided that.
Never a single issue campaign for everyone. It's never a monotony of an issue that is deciding how everyone engages with politics. And to put that into context, what happens in Kampala or who is beaten about what is very different for the reasons for which people are being beaten in Soroti and the local context there. If you realize that, you might get closer to the answers we are seeking. It's a painful reality, but it's the true nature of politics. That what matters to you here, regardless of how high up the ladder it is, it doesn't matter to everyone everywhere. The things that matter to some people is just basic food, while another person, it's whether they will afford tuition for their students the next day. For them to boil it down to whether it's President Museveni alone or NRM's leadership alone will take a lot of organizing to achieve, for them to understand it that way. First, even leave the fact that the NRM itself will be working for that not to be a consensus build. That's the first thing we all need to accept. The second thing we need to accept is that nobody takes on power to let it go. Certainly not people who spent 5 years living in the bushes. And I want, for me, I've come to the realization that it might be wiser to organize with the understanding that people who spent 5 years sleeping outside houses are not going to say that let us just walk in on them and they walk out without a fight. If you understand that, and you understand the extent, we've had this argument with Mugisha Muntu.
So that means, Jacob, the point of
just let me complete this point,
that
Mariam.
point of conversation is futile.
Oh no, I'm coming to that. I'm coming to that. Because what you have to decide what you're organizing for. That's the first point I made. You're either organizing for an end product or you're organizing for a process. If you organize for the Big Bang Theory, to say the NRM must dissipate, or maybe not even the NRM, but this family which is leading the NRM must dissipate, then the cost is going to be much higher. The cost is going to probably be like what happened in Libya, what happened in Sudan, which we are still seeing that the end product that was thought after dissipation of this one level has not yet been achieved. Some 10 going into 20 years later. You need to, for those who organize for that, well and good. The war of attrition, where you can go ahead and achieve that, is one end. There's another group which will say, no, and this argument, I want to just give you the experience we had with General Mugisha Muntu. We had it with him and said, look, why are you not encouraging young people to do what you did when you were young? In 1980, you were educated, you were at Makerere. Mugisha Muntu was not even suffering the brunt of what we are hearing. Mugisha Muntu was from the family of an established politician living in Kololo, I think high in the ranks of government. But he said at the time, the conditions could allow us to achieve what we are trying to do in those means. In other words, if we had organized for social media and so on, it was not there then. What was available then was bushes, a small population, a fatigued state, a state that's not well organized, that could be compromised in many ways. He said to us that those young people who insist that that can be the new model and employed now are in the wrong traction. And that's why he said, for you who want to run a sprint, I encourage you to go ahead. We are not stopping you. Our modus is going to be this. We could all see that for him, maybe he's not understanding what we are saying or what young people are saying and the problems. But in reality, he had lived both worlds. He had lived on the side of fighting for our rights in ways that would give up his life. He had also lived as one of those who are benefiting from the system. And he has also now lived as one of the people who are fighting to bring down the system. Whichever side of the aisle you're on, nobody in Uganda will tell you around the system, whether you're in the NRM or out of it. If you can accept that the circumstances are different and politics flows in different ways, you might begin to look at and say, what are the wins we can achieve regardless of the many losses we are counting? If you can see things that way, we might make some progress. If you say that, no, for us, we are about a totalitarian outcome. In other words, there must be an outcome that goes one single file. It will take us a long time to achieve new emerging young faces in the politics.
Jacob and the guys, I want us to, Kemi, let's give Janice the last word and let her be the one, because she's the people. These ones
Just
are the
the people.
politicians. She's the people. So let her have the last word. We'll wind up, and then I'll just ask everyone to stay online, and we have a quick chat off air. So to sort of plan how this can be the platform where, irrespective of the way we think and the way we feel, the conversation can achieve some kind of clarity about what can be done. So, Janice, you are the people. You are the tomorrow. So you tell us what tomorrow looks like.
Again,
before-
I don't. Oh, okay.
Just a second. Just before you start, Janice, I thought, just from the feeling of what we've been discussing, because there's no doubt it's an emotional thing. I'm sure we can all feel it as we have this conversation, and around organizing or lack thereof, or does it matter, and what does that mean for how we move forward? I remembered an article of yours that I read. I'm going to quote you verbatim, where you said that if you actually wanted to see power change hands, common sense requires backing the strongest likely competitor, someone who has the machinery, resources, the voter field operation to actually cross the finish line. In 2026, we appear to be running a political version of a middle school science fair. Everyone has a table, everyone gets to make their presentation, and no one actually supplants the headmaster. And kudos for the humorous angle, but I feel like it's something significant, even throughout the article, like the sentiment you were expressing around, I don't know, I could feel a little bit of apathy there. I could feel, there's also fact, the fact of, I felt that when I was looking at my ballot, as I said earlier, just seeing how fractured the opposition is and what that means for the things that we're actually collectively trying to achieve and what we want to see. So, like, through that lens, and you being the tomorrow, as Robert has now coined you, just tell us.
I just wanted to preface this by saying I don't think I'm the proper representation of the people in this particular regard, because I have gone through all the stages of political depression, in that I've been at where Marion is, I've been at where Ochai is, and I've been at where Jacob is, right? Because especially for someone who engages with political discourse, not only in academia, because that's what I'm pursuing, but also juxtaposing with what's happening in real life, but also engaging these conversations with people who are actually politically engaged. And so you ended up throwing me on a panel full of people who have practical experience. And me, I'm just getting everything on a back end. And so I don't think I'm the proper representation of the people, because what Jacob was talking about, he doesn't understand how social media translates to ground action. That is something I realized when I started having political discourse online. In that you could be talking about something as basic as, for example, PDM, breaking down what PDM is, how it operates, why it operates, because information around that particular structure is not really reliable to Omuntu wa bulijjo. They just see it as an abstract idea, but they cannot conceptualize it. So I try to break that down. And when people have that conversation in the comment section, or try to help me and essentially give their feedback, you can see not only apathy, but also a sense of I don't know how to express that. And so it comes to me having it, which also, so I battle with that, because Jacob is saying we need to have an elite group of people who are educated, who are competent, but at the same time, you reach a point whereby the elite people often separate themselves from the reality, an issue that Marion was talking about, right? So there's this middle ground whereby you are trying to figure out what's the most plausible way out. A system is working against you, but at the same time, you don't have the capacity to uproot that system entirely. Jacob has also talked about this. History has shown that absolute abstraction doesn't necessarily lead to an effective end. It doesn't, one could argue for the US, which went through a revolution. Another one could tell you Libya went through a revolution, and you can see what happened, what has happened. So as a person who's actually engaging academically in this particular field. I must tell you, I'm not the best person to represent the voice of the people, because when you go down to actually have a conversation with a regular Ugandan, and they literally don't care about the structures. They just care, how am I getting food today? Can I take my kids to school? That is all they care about, the bare minimum. And until their bare minimum is pushed to a state whereby they can no longer afford that bare minimum, that's when I think Marion's issue comes in, when the people feel so pressed to the extent that they feel, okay, we need to quote unquote break free from it. And until Ugandans reach that point, I don't see them ever revolting. I think that's something the system has very much understood. And so the current political system will never push Ugandans to that level. And so that's why this whole conversation of, if you want to be safe in Uganda, do not join politics. Because Ugandans have in their head that the only people who get the heat of politics are those who are actively in it. So they separate themselves from the results of political decisions or activities from what is actually happening. So there is no direct correlation, because they just see Babi was attacked, or so it's distant. So in their mind, it's like, as long as I never stand up to run for office, I'm safe. So it's a whole lot of mess, and I'm so new to this, and it always gets so overwhelming, because then you are placed in a situation where you're thinking, what is the most plausible route, which goes back to Jacob's point of what is the end goal, something that I'm still trying to figure out, and something very many young people are still battling with.
And on that note, I will tell you that the answer is in having forums like this, where every day we come back, irrespective of our feelings, irrespective of how we feel, but come back, express it, and hopefully start a journey towards some kind of middle ground on some of the issues. And I would like to say that this being the first one, I'm promising not just you guys on the panel, but all the people who are listening to us, that part of the mission of solving the problems you guys have talked about is me and Kemi being here every Saturday morning from now on the new platforms that exist that make this possible to have this conversation. So my appeal to you, Jacob, Marion, Kelvin, Janice, is that as part of your national responsibility, you accept to be part of this conversation. You just never know one day where that will go. Over to you, Kemi.
And if I can add just one thing to what you said, Janice, you were not just thrown on this panel. When we say you're the people, we don't mean you're every person, but you're certainly one of the people, and you represent a demographic that's none of us know as intimately as you do. And even that you expressed about when you quoted what Jacob said about specific, what are we working towards, and you said we are still figuring out what that looks like for us. It's key. It's key as we have these conversations. And so it's what you expressed is the people. It's not every person, but it's certainly the people. And so it's important. Like, you are a very intentional, I don't say pick like we were cherry picking, but you were an intentional person that we invited to this conversation for there's an angle that you come from that is very different from each of us. So we hope that you'll keep on joining us, our audience, every Saturday at 9:30 a.m. EAT, as we have these conversations about our country, really, and the different, regardless of where we are coming from or what affiliations we have, we really do want very similar things. That the things that we want are the good things for Uganda. So join us every single Saturday. If you prefer podcast, on next week, you'll be able to catch us on Apple Podcasts, the New Breed Podcast UG, so you can catch us there as well. And we'll expand to a couple of more podcast platforms as you remain with us. Follow us on social media, the New Breed Podcast UG, and we will see you next Saturday, 9:30 a.m., same time, same place. From Morabat and I, have a fantastic weekend.